Okay, so after step 6 is step 7, which is establish a vehicle for change. In order for the community change effort to be effective, there needs to be some organizational structure and processes in place. In this case, at an initial meeting, those that indicated an interest in working together to improve the community decide to form a community coalition or partnership made up of organizations and community members. So, through our initial meeting, you would have had gained partners in this community engagement initiatives. So, people interested in what you were doing would have told you they were interested, and then you would have built a relationship with them. These partnerships are very important as they assist you in now implementing action plans and change drives. Okay, so you need to answer in addition to community partners, what, if any, organization do you think should be recruited to join the project? Right? So as I mentioned in step 6, you need to look at organizations like NGOs, CBOs, civil society organizations, NPOs, NGOs, industries, companies. You need to look at potential funders. Maybe you need to look at sponsors who are interested in, for example, farming. You need to look at for example, cotton farming, maybe you look at small business enterprises or farming industries. You can look at maritime. I know your students spoke about an organization that was presented during your presentations. So look at using those organizations to help you in your initiatives, right? Then look at what are some of the governing principles you think the partnerships should adopt. Example, how are decisions made? Who can speak on behalf of the partnership? How are the partnership members informed of meetings and actions on behalf of the partnership? So for a B, please ensure that you answer all of these questions as they are important details that you need to include in your answer. So what are some of the governing principles you think the partnerships should adopt? So when you're looking at principles of partnerships, go to your Blackboard again under content. You will see that I have included some reading for you. So you have principles of partnership, principles of effective partnership, you have principles of community engagement, and then you have partnerships in community engagement and development. So read these articles as they're going to provide you with lots of details to help you answer step 7. Then you can come to step 7, you'll have a better understanding. You'll understand what are the principles of community engagement and what are the principles of participatory engagement, as well as what are the principles of creating a good partnership, right? So let's look at your assessment criteria for steps 6 and 7. So step 6 and 7 have one assessment criteria, establishing partnerships, and then you have 10 marks for both step 6 and step 7. So again, specific, clear, informative. So you need to ensure the partnerships are identified. You know who some of the people you want to be a part of your partnership, and they are all clearly identified and stated. Then you need to know the roles of partners are also identified. So what is the role of these partners? What are they giving to the partnership? Okay. It needs to be relevant to your case study again, and then you need to have governing principles of partnerships identified. So again, read those articles on Blackboard and they will help you to understand what the principles of partnerships are. We also covered the principles of community engagement and partnerships during our lecture. So if you go back and look at your worksheets, we've discussed it. You have given me answers to it, so use that as well, right? So let's look at step 8 now. Step 8 is develop an action plan. Use the action planning chart below to identify what needs to be done, when, who should do it, and what resources will be required. So, community action plan, your goals. So, please spell out what is the goal of your community engagement initiative. This again would relate back to your case study and what is needed of Tobeka and Tembe Lishle. Okay, So you will have, see, 3 tasks, right? So you will write out your tasks, what your tasks are in the first column, then the resources required. So you need to look at source of the resources, who's giving it. Do you need cash or do you need in kind? So is it a service? Is it a donation, etc. Right? So you would put this into your columns. So let's look at your assessment criteria. Community action plan for 10 marks again. So please ensure it's detailed, specific, and informative. So your tasks need to be clearly identified, responsibility allocated, partnerships considered, who is responsible. So under the source, look at who is responsible for this task. Will it be the community? Will it be an organization? Will it be you as a student, right? Then resources are also identified. So how much of cash do you need? How much of volunteers do you need to carry it out? Sorry. How much of cash do you need to carry out the uh, task, and how much of volunteers or donations or in kind do you need to carry out the task, right? So take all of this into consideration. If you're looking at, for example, textile technology, if you are looking at trainers to train community members on cotton farming, that would be your first task, train. Then you'll have a source. So maybe you have an organization who is already training community members who will take over this. And then you'll have how much will it cost? So will the organization still charge people or community members, or will they do it in kind? So maybe the organization's name will still be there. And then for nautical studies, for example, maybe you have an NGO that's going to come along with you to the inland provinces. So your task would be educating um, community members on the importance of maritime studies or maritime careers. And then who will do this? Maybe it will be you as students, maybe it'll be DUT staff, your lecturers, maybe it'll be an organization. And then will you charge people for this, or what are the costs for you to go there? Because remember, now you're going inland, you live in Durban, so what are the costs to go there? So you'll need cash for that, or in kind, what do you need to ensure this task is carried out, right? So take into consideration everything that's needed, ensure that you understand the procedure and you are able to get your 10 marks for step 8. Right, so let's look at step 9 now. Implement action plan. It is likely that funds will be required to implement the action plan. What are the risks from a community development point of view in accessing external funding and developing close working relationships with funding sources? How can risks be lessened? Are there local funding sources that could be tapped? If so, identify. So for step 9, you were looking at funding of the action plan. So any project requires funds, right? So in gaining these funds, there are a lot of risks and a lot of issues that may arise through funders or through actually acquiring the funds. So you need to look at what are some of those issues that may arise and how you could possibly prevent or avoid some of these issues, lessening them, right? So you need to look at maybe issues with getting the funding. Who do you go to get the fundings? Or if you look at issues of funders letting you down and so forth. So how will you ensure you lessen the risks of um, obtaining external funding, right? How would you get internal funding then? Look at those areas of internal funding. Then you need to look at local funding sources need to be identified. So again, look at your organizations, look at your companies, look at your industries, um, look at people willing to sponsor such initiatives, right? Look at for your textile students, look at your small business enterprises, look at your farming enterprises, look at your agri enterprises so that you find something that is related to your case study. Okay, so let's look at number 10, evaluate results of actions, right? So step 10, evaluate results of actions. The community partnerships has worked hard with its many partners and supporters to meet their goal. How will you evaluate whether your project has been successful? Okay, so every community engagement project has to be evaluated and monitored so that we can improve the way the project has been done to ensure that if it's done again, it's done in a better manner. And if a new project arises, it's also done in a way that we've learned from our mistakes and we've learned from our lessons. So, what are your criteria for success? So, you as a student to look at what do you think would make your project successful? How would you know that your project was successful? Remember that our goals are not always achieved in a community engagement project. Sometimes think processes are slow, so we don't achieve our goals. But it's important that we look at the values that we used in the project, and we look at where the community is at the project. So maybe the goal was not achieved, but the goal will be achieved because it's still in process. So look at that. Also look at empowering the community. Okay, so most communities are not used to community engagement. They're used to someone coming in there telling them what to do, how to do it, and then they leave. Okay, we are now going into the community, working with them, empowering them, teaching them. They are teaching us, and we are working together to solve the issues. So that's providing a lot of empowerment. Okay, so success comes in different packages, and we just need to ensure that we cover the different packages that may indicate success for a community engagement project for us, right? Then we need to look at who will be involved in the evaluation process. So again, look at equality, look at equal decision making, look at the fact that everyone in this partnership were equal members and should be a part of every process as per participatory approach. Each member should be a part of every process of community engagement. So take that into consideration when answering step 10. Let's look at the assessment criteria for step 10 for 5 marks. You need to tell me, you need to include those involved in the evaluation process. So who was involved in the evaluation process and what is your group's criteria for success related to your specific case study and context of your case study. All right, so that's 5 marks. And then our last question is step 11, reflect and regroup. So the last step for community engagement initiatives would be what activities will help the group to wrap up the project? How are there any spin-off benefits or unintended outcomes of the project? Use your imagination. How will you assess whether there is interest or energy for tackling another area of concern from the list developed at the community visioning session? Okay, so basically, wrapping up your project is how will you disengage with the community members, or how will you hand over your project to the team that's taking over? How will you say bye to the community? Uh, what area in your action plan will you leave the community when you are exiting? Okay, will you leave them during implementation, etc.? Then you need to look at using your imagination. What are some of the unexpected things that happened that was both beneficial or maybe that caused issues in your project? And then finally, you need to look at how will you assess whether the interest or energy for tackling another area of concern from the list of developed at the community visioning session. Okay, so in our case study, we addressed the issue of Tembelishle and Tobeka. But what if another issue arose in your initial meeting? And do you think you could achieve this? So you need to reflect back and let us know what whether you think that could be achieved. And then looking at your assessment criteria for 5 marks, step 11, you need to have wrap up activities identified and they are relevant to the context. So spell it out, ensure we understand how you're going to disengage with the community and what process you're going to use. So that's your case study and what your instructions are for completing your case study. So ensure you come back Watch the video again as many times as possible and are ready to complete your case study.